today's video. Today I'll be talking about the history of Christmas. If you watched my previous 2 Christmas facts videos, doesn't really matter. This video will be a little different. It's almost going to be a story time. And I prepared some notes because I don't want to mess this up. But before I start, I just want to say that I found this information from all kinds of sources, but some of them are not clear. We don't exactly know about their traditions, sometimes, especially if it's like from 2,000 years ago. So if something will be wrong in this video, you can let me know in the comments. By the way, I hope you like this new lighting, because before then I just used the ceiling lights, and I wish I come up with this sooner, but I didn't. So now let's get on with the video. Okay, so let's talk about how Christmas started. It basically originated from pagan traditions. There was a lot of festivities around winter solstice. A lot of peasants, should I say peasants or people? Let's say people. Back in the day, they slaughtered a lot of their farm animals, like pigs and cows, just so they wouldn't have to feed them over winter. I'm sorry that this starts like with that, but it's true. And it was pretty much the only time when they had fresh meat, or at least lots of fresh meat. So they wanted to celebrate. Also, it was the middle of winter. Probably they were feeling a bit depressed, so some celebration was fine. In Scandinavia, they celebrated something called Yule, and pretty much the men in the household would bring a huge log, and they called it the Yule log, and they set it up on fire. And as long as the Yule was burning, they were feasting or celebrating, and they believed that each spark from the log meant that a new pig or a cow will be born in the next year. In Germany, they also celebrated a pagan god called Odin. I guess that's how you pronounce it. And there was a legend that this god is flying through the sky every night, or at night. I don't know if every night, so you wouldn't get tired, but he's flying at the sky at night, and he's deciding who is going to perish and who is going to thrive the next year. And they were afraid of him, so they usually stayed at home. Now, let's talk about ancient Rome, because this is where Christmas actually is rumored to be originated or derived. So in ancient Rome, they celebrated something called Saturnalia, and it was a celebration starting from 17th of December. It always started with a massive public sacrifice. Actually, I don't know if it was massive or not. It was just a public sacrifice, and that's when the holiday began. Usually it was celebrated for 5 days up to multiple weeks. It depends on which emperor was currently ruling. They celebrated this over the course of 600 years, so sometimes the emperors adjusted the days. What was important is that during that time, the social order was completely turned upside down. In ancient Rome, they had slaves, and during this holiday, the roles would be reversed. So the slaves would become masters, and masters would become slaves, or at least that's how it was on paper. We know that sometimes the reality was totally different. The slaves were supposed to be in charge. They could take the time off. They could dine with their masters. They were not allowed to do that usually. And they could also talk back to their masters, which they usually also were not allowed to do that. We know that sometimes the owner of the slaves didn't really want to do this. They maybe allowed them to take time off, but they did not actually dine with them. And even though this sounds like a really nice holiday, in reality, it was more to remind the slaves who the real master is, and it was enforcing slavery. So they sort of, for a couple of days, they experienced how life would be like if they were free, but then they had to go back to slavery or to work in a few days or in a month. Also, businesses were closed during that time, schools too, and everybody was just celebrating. On December 25th, some of the upper class members also celebrated a god called Mithra. Mithra was an infant god who was supposed to be born out of a rock, and they actually made this into an official religion in 274 AD, and it was by the Roman Emperor Valerian. And 25th of December was a birthday of a god, Sol Invictus, so that's how they kind of named him and put him into the official religion. Around that time they also celebrated something called Juvenalia, and when I was searching for this festivity holiday, I couldn't find a lot of information. Apparently it was a day where they celebrated children, and children were allowed to feast and they treat them well. But the origin of this holiday is a bit different. It was actually in 59 AD when the Roman Emperor Nero wanted to celebrate his first shaving of his beard, and he made it into a huge celebration, and he also threw pretty much like a party and some scenic games, and there was pretty much no mention of celebrating children. I guess it kind of evolved into that later on, because he didn't care about children, he cared about his beard pretty much. Okay, you gotta love the Roman emperors. They did the most basic things and they turned it into a holiday. So with that in mind, we can kind of see that the first maybe celebration of children as Christmas should be pretty much already was 2000 years ago. Well, around that time Christianity came into play and it was created, and we actually don't know when exactly Jesus was born because the Bible does not mention that. And the birth of Jesus wasn't celebrated at all. It actually, in the 4th century, the Pope called Julius I chose December 25th as a day where we would celebrate Jesus, the birth of Jesus. There are two theories why that was. The theory number one is that they didn't really know when he was born. Some sources actually say that he might have been born in spring, and they just chose December 25th in order to erase the pagan holidays from history and kind of absorb it into the new holiday. It's important to note that even though they chose this date, they did not decide how it was celebrated, and they did not celebrate Christmas as we know it today. They actually called it Feast of the Nativity. So you can kind of see that it was very, very similar. The second theory says that they pretty much calculated the birth and it was either December 25th or January the 6th. And they just chose December 25th. It's important to know that the Russian churches celebrated this holiday on January the 6th actually. And it's because they don't use the Gregorian calendar that most Western countries use, or even some Asian countries, but they use the Julian calendar, and the Julian calendar is 14 to 15 days late. So the actual birth of Jesus falls on January the 6th. Greece adapted the Gregorian calendar in 1923, but some countries, they still celebrate it on January the 6th, and those countries are Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Belarus, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Kazakhstan. Probably there's more, but this is what the list said. Even to us, January the 6th is still significant because that's when we celebrate the Epiphany, or the Three Kings Day. By choosing this date around the winter solstice, where a lot of people wanted to celebrate, the holiday became very popular and it was spreading quite quickly. And by the 8th century, it was pretty much all over Europe, even in Scandinavia. Let's talk about Middle Ages for a little bit, because the celebration was totally different. And let's say in 1038, in the year 1038, they first used the word Christ Mass, which actually evolved into Christmas, the word that we know today. And they would fast until December 24th. And then the 12 full days of festivities began. And the whole pinnacle of this was January the 6th. And it was almost a combination of some Scandinavian traditions, the Yule, it depends on the region. Some of it still came from Saturnalia. Well, pretty much it was a one big drunken festival. One person was always appointed the Lord of Misrule, and it usually was a peasant, some kind of a student, and he was made almost a king of the festival, and everybody had to listen to him. In a way, they almost mocked the king position by that. So if he said that everybody's going to drink, everybody had to drink, I think I don't have to explain it. Around the time, they also sang a lot, and that's how some carols were created. Some of them were religious, some of them were rude. Depends. And it was almost like this huge carnival festival. And sometimes the poor would go to the rich people houses and they would demand their best food and drink. And drinks. And if they didn't give them anything, or I don't know exactly the details, but if the peasants were not satisfied, they usually just would cause some trouble and some mischief. It's almost like a trick or treat in a way, a little bit. And yeah, it says that they would terrorize them with mischief, so take it as it is. And in a way, this was seen as that the rich people were paying off their debt to the society, that they were giving something back. Now let's go to England. And the England was under the rule of House of Tudor from 15th century to 17th century, if I'm correct. And they took the medieval festivals to another level. Though it was pretty much the same thing as I just told you with the medieval celebrations. They would bake a bean into a cake, and whoever found that bean became the king. Again, the king of the bean, that's what it was called. If a woman found that bean, she would have to choose her king. And I was known to dance around this time, around the festival, and she even had her own like dancing chamber, and they played a game called cushion dance, which meant that a person would place a cushion in front of his chosen partner that he or she wanted to dance with, and that person had to kiss them and then join the dance. And then after that, the person who was chosen had to choose another partner until everybody was dancing. So they were pretty much all kissing each other and dancing. Hopefully none of them got cold sores, but you know. They also had tons of sugar in that feast, so that's why they probably had so much energy for the dance. They put sugar into wine. They had the sugar wine. They also created, apparently, these models of castles or dragons or goblins or whatever, and they made it out of sugar and they would eat it. Apparently there was this quote that the queen, her teeth went black from eating all the sugar. Let's still stay in England, because that's when the England was overthrown by Oliver Cromwell, and he did a bunch of revolutions. Technically, the England became a republic. That happened in 1645, and he pretty much cancelled all of the festivities. He said that the England needs to get rid of its decadence, and he cancelled Christmas just completely. After his death, though, the King Charles II was restored to the throne, and all of those festivities began again, because people missed that, obviously. During this time, also the Pilgrims came to America, and that was in 1620, actually. And they were they had the same opinion as Oliver Cromwell had, and they also believed that the Christmas should not be celebrated, and it was banned pretty much. It was even outlawed in Boston from 1659 to 1681. Some people say that you could even be fined if you showed Christmas spirit. Some sources say that nobody really cared, but I guess it depends on the region. And obviously after the American Revolution, this was seen as an English holiday, and it just fell out of favor completely. The Christmas actually became a federal holiday in 1870, so quite a long time after what I was just talking about. And in the beginning of the 19th century, there was a lot of social conflicts, a lot of social classes conflicts. There were riots pretty much. Some gangs were rioting a lot, usually around the Christmas time, probably because it was winter. They didn't have a lot to eat. And actually in 1828, the New York City Council first instituted for the police, because they just needed someone to control the riots in a way. And that was when Washington Irving first wrote a very famous book, The Sketchbook. The full name is The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Gentleman. And in this book, he wrote about a squire who invited peasants into his home, and he treated them with some food and drinks, and they all celebrated together. So he was really trying to set this image that all social classes can celebrate together. He also described the tradition of the Lord of Misrule that I was just talking about, and he truly made an emphasis about how people can come together and celebrate and enjoy some ancient customs. That's how he called it. And it's interesting how that book truly made a difference, because in a way, this is the Christmas that we know today, where people can come together and they can celebrate, charity introduced the Christmas tree, the Queen Victoria. And we know that Christmas tree came originally from Germany. If I remember correctly, originally it was hanging from the ceiling. And probably people, figured out that this is, kind of hard to do, so then they just placed it on the ground. And Queen Victoria loved this so much that I think they actually made a drawing of her and her kids in a newspaper, and that's how that tradition became spread. Queen Victoria was truly an influential woman. Even till today, for example, one thing is that we wear white on a wedding because of her. It was her who actually wore a white wedding dress for the first time. Before that, women wore colored dresses to their weddings, but it was Queen Victoria who actually set this example, tradition. And in that time, England was huge. It had huge colonies in Canada, Australia, India, all over Africa. It was a huge empire. So anything that happened in England became quickly widely spread all over the world. Okay, it was actually where, during this time, people first started to see the importance of celebrating with family, and they would give their kids gifts. Usually it was sweets or nuts or oranges, even though some wealthier kids might have gotten toys, such as the train, which probably was really expensive during that time. Tons of Christmas traditions originated in that time period as well, such as the Christmas cards, the crackers, and also eating turkey and eating Christmas pudding too. And around this time, Charles Dickens wrote a very famous book called The Christmas Carol in 1843. And again, this was a very influential book. He pretty much stated how important charity is and good deeds, especially around Christmas time. And it made an impact not only in England, where he was from, but also in, I should say, the United Kingdom, though at this point, well, okay, not only in the UK, but also in America. Tons of Christmas carols were created during this time period as well, such as Good King Wenceslas, Once in Royal David's City, and O Come All Ye Faithful. Okay, let's go back to America for a little bit, because American Christmas was pieced together by all kinds of traditions from all around the world. There were a lot of immigrants in America, and that's actually how the Santa Claus was created, or came to light. So the legend of Santa Claus begins at 280 AD actually, and there was a monk called Saint Nicholas who was born in Turkey, and he gave away all of his inherited wealth and just traveled the countryside, and he helped the poor and sick. And this legend, was known all over Europe, and it was when some Dutch families gathered to honor the anniversary of the death of Saint Nicholas, and for short it was Sinterklaas, and that's when Santa Claus was created, in a way, was made from that. And also there was a very famous poem by Clement Clark Moore, who wrote a poem called An Account of a Visit from Saint Nicholas, and here he depicted Santa Claus as a jolly man who flies from home to home on a sled driven by reindeer to deliver toys. So you can kind of see that that's how it was made, it was created. That was the final version of Santa Claus pretty much. And then the iconic version of Santa Claus with a white beard and a sack of toys was created in 1881 actually, when a cartoonist called Thomas Nast actually drew how the Santa Claus was portrayed in the poem, and that's how the famous image was created. And that's it really. That's all I have to say for this video. I know that I said quite a lot of stuff in this video, so I hope you didn't get overwhelmed, or maybe you're asleep already, that's fine too. If you're still awake though, you can come join me on the Christmas Eve 24th, where I'll be talking about the Christmas in Eastern Europe, where I live. About my country, Czech Republic though, because we are a very atheist country and our Christmas is a little different, and they didn't mention this at all when I was like researching stuff about Christmas. So you can come join me in a very special video on the Christmas Eve. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys liked this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.